All right, everybody, welcome to today's webinar with Richard Tolsma. We are going to go over some really cool information that covers why video storytelling is important and how you can make it happen for your nonprofit. Before we get started, just let me introduce myself. My name is Abby, and I am part of the team over at QGive. We are an online fundraising platform that is invested in helping nonprofits like you raise more money online. And that's why we're so excited to have someone like Rich on with us to talk about how you can use video to do that. Just a quick note, I know some of you who are on here are QGive clients. If you have any questions about how to use video on your donation form, on your thank you page, in your receipts, or in any materials that you create with QGive's platform, let me know. If I can't answer the question for you, I will get you to the person who can. If you don't use QGive, that's totally fine. Everything we go over today is going to be applicable to you as well. And before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping things. We are recording this webinar, and you're going to get a copy of it from me and some other resources probably on Thursday morning. So keep an eye out on your inbox for that. Also, please feel free to ask us questions. You can use the chat box that's over on your left to ask anything that pops into your mind. We've got a pretty manageable group today. So we have a lot of opportunities to get your specific questions into this presentation at the end. I am going to be tweeting along with some of what we go over today on the QGive webinar hashtag, so that's right there. And here are the Twitter handles for Tolsma Productions and QGive. So if you like this presentation and you want to keep an eye on what Rich and his team have to say, that is absolutely the best place to do it. On that note, with us is Rich Tolsma. He has a ton of experience producing video programs, specifically nonprofit videos. So if you've ever had questions about the hows and whys of producing videos for nonprofits, and you're a nonprofit specifically, you are totally in the right place. Rich, I am going to turn things over to you.
Okay, let me see how I can get my screen back. Here we go. All right. Here we go. Okay. Thank you for inviting us today, Abby. I'm really happy to be here. Before I tell you a little bit about myself and our company, we've got some poll questions for you. I'll put myself on the screen here if I can. Let's see where we are. There we go. Now you should be able to see me.
Awesome.
So Abby's got a few poll questions, and that's going to help us understand who you are and what you're up to. So I'm going to present those to you now. First of all, we'd like to know, how are you currently using video? How does your organization currently use video? So those are some of the most common, and I wouldn't be surprised if somebody says we don't yet.
Well, so far it looks like people are pretty solid on the website and special events. We do have a couple of people who said that they don't use it at all, but only 9% so far have said that they don't use video at all. Another 9% say that they use it in email. 45%, 50% are using it on social media. 83% are using video on their website. And there are also quite a number of people who are using them for special events. So it looks like everybody's in, and that's kind of how everything wrapped up together. 15% don't use it at all, and it looks like everybody's pretty varied except for email.
That's great, and that's probably about what I expected to hear. I'm glad to hear that people are using it in a variety of places, including social media. That's really important, and I think everybody by now knows that. What are some of the obstacles you face? Question number 2 in our little poll. What are some of the obstacles that you face when you go to use video?
These are really interesting. I know Cost is always a big concern for nonprofits, especially because the you have to be able to kind of prove that you're going to have a return on your investment. And based on the responses I'm getting right now, cost is definitely something that is an obstacle for a lot of people. It also looks like not knowing where to start is a big concern. So right now, 55% of you say that you don't really know where to start, and time, of course, is a big concern. I'm excited and surprised that so few of you seem to be facing a lack of buy-in as an obstacle. There are certainly some of you who do face that, but it's not nearly as big a concern as cost. That certainly seems to be the biggest obstacle.
Uh, I'm also not surprised at that. I think the lack of buy-in is disappearing in time because more and more we're hearing about the importance of using video. And as everybody becomes more savvy about social media, they understand that. Um, Even some of the older board members get it now, and they may not have before. So, okay, that's not too surprising either. Um, what metrics would you most like to see? In other words, what objectives would you like video to help you solve? And yes, I'm glad it says select one or more of the following, because I'll bet you just about everybody is going to check the first one there.
Yep. Yeah, that I'm totally
How many
not
people are
surprised.
checking all four?
Well, there look like there are at least 50% of people who are checking all four.
Okay.
So that's certainly not surprising. I am not surprised at all to see that increased fundraising is definitely a priority for literally everyone who's voted. I am excited to see that increasing social media engagement is something that's on people's radar. So it's so easy to kind of put videos out there hoping for better donation rates and not necessarily focusing on engagement, which is so important. Um, so yeah, shocker. 100% of you are very invested in increasing your fundraising. Increasing awareness of your mission is huge, followed by social media engagement and getting more followers on social.
Well, then the next question plays right off of that, and that is what platforms are you currently using in social media?
I'm really excited to
Currently
see
using
this one.
video. Not that I
Very
assume
excited
that
to
you're
see.
all currently using these platforms, but where are you currently using video? What you got there, Abby?
Right now, it looks like the majority of people are definitely using it on Facebook and on their website, and a smaller number of people are using video on Twitter and Instagram. So Facebook and website are tied, and Twitter and Instagram are tied. And it looks like Facebook and the website win.
Pretty
Um,
even, yeah.
Twitter, Twitter and Instagram less so than those two.
Yeah, and those are probably the two primary ones we see generally, and those are the two that I understand. James, you're on the line with us too. Uh, James, my associate, is much more media savvy when it comes to social media, and he's really good at keeping our Twitter account and our Instagram account going because I can't do it all, and maybe you can't do it all either. So you need somebody like James to help you out, right, James?
Yes, that's correct.
And he's there to help if you need a help too. All right, let me tell you a little bit about me and about us. We're based in Philadelphia, first of all, but I am not in Philadelphia today. I am on the sweltering seacoast of Maine, where it's never supposed to get this hot. So I've got a fan going in the background, and the minute this is over, I'm going to go jump in the ocean. So I hope, I think probably most of you are sweltering too because we've got a heat wave going all across the country. I come out of a background of education and corporate communications, but back in 1996, I started my own business, and it wasn't long before me and the team of people working with me realized that the nonprofit sector was where we really wanted to be doing our work for a number of reasons. One, nonprofits have the best stories to tell. And secondly, it's the most meaningful work that we can do. And I'd wager that most of you are working in the nonprofit section because you find it to be meaningful. And that's pretty much why we're there. We have a team of people who are thoroughly expert in different areas of media production and post-production. And we put together the right team for each project. It gives us a lot of flexibility, and we're able to handle just about anything that comes along. We work for all kinds of nonprofits. As long as we can get behind the mission, if we can get behind your mission, we can get involved with your project. But they can be large nonprofits down to very small grassroots nonprofits. We find a way to work with just about everybody at just about any price point. So that's enough about us. Let me get to my slides here and get these up for you. So yeah, everybody knows they need them, but not everybody knows what to do next. Let's talk for a minute about stories. And I should preface this by saying anything that I say today, almost anything, it's not an absolute. But these are generalizations and things that we've found to be true in most instances. But we've heard a lot over the last 10 years or so about the importance of storytelling. And so if we ask ourselves the question, why do we tell stories? There's really a scientific reason for it. I had the opportunity to attend a session with this gentleman who wrote Story Proof. And I was very interested to find out that there is a scientific reason. Our brains have been hardwired through time to make sense through stories. And that's why we respond so well to them. If our brains are receiving information in the form of data, subconsciously our brains turn it into a story without our even knowing it. And that takes time, and it can also convolute the story. So if you want to get right through to a person most directly, story is the way to do it. If you're interested in this at all, I would highly recommend his book. It's really fascinating. And I don't know if you might be familiar with these two terms, oxytocin and cortisol. Oxytocin is the hormone that your brain produces, I believe I'm being scientifically correct, that gives you pleasure, that gives you positive feelings, whereas cortisol is the stress hormone that triggers the fight or flight mechanism in the brain. And I found this not that long ago, and I'll let you read it. I don't need to read it to you. I found this to be fascinating. And especially that part, because that really relates to what it is that we do. We are trying to get people to get engaged with and to donate to or volunteer for our organization. Stories, particularly narratives shot with face-to-face interactions, are going to get us the results that we want. So what makes a good story? Well, people like stories about people, not organizations. And these stories are stories for us when we're trying to raise money and interest. These are stories of impact, and specifically true stories. and true stories told in the first person. I'm sure many of you do interviews and write stories for your newsletter or what have you. These stories are the ones that really make the most impact. I always suggest that you try to limit yourself to telling a single story about a single person. If we try to do too much, we dilute our message. And that can be a challenge sometimes, because you'll say, an organization will say, but Rich, we do so many different things. We want to tell the story about our mission. We want to tell about all the different things that we do. And I try to get them, not always successfully, to resist that. Because that single story about a single person told in the first person by the person who is being impacted by the work of your organization, that's the story that's going to hit home. That's the story that's going to make the most impact and get you the result that you're looking for. I talk about stories of aspiration, and by that I mean stories that people can relate to because they explain things that we all aspire to. We all aspire to having a good job, to having a good relationship with our family, to being able to live in a good neighborhood, in a decent home. We aspire to these things. We want a decent education for ourselves and our loved ones. But lots of times we go to this other paradigm that we are so comfortable with, and that's problem solution. We talk about a problem. There are all of these homeless people on the streets, and our organization has the solution. We have shelters for them, we have intake, we have people out on the streets. There's the problem, we have the solution. What that does is it makes you and your organization the hero. And we'll talk about that in a minute. You don't want to be the hero. You want your donor to be the hero. So we want to avoid this. Here's the problem. We have the solution. But we want to talk more about, here is what life can be like. Here's the possibility. There are some obstacles on the way to this possibility. And we were helped beyond those obstacles, to get over those obstacles, by this organization through the support of donors like you, to start off with the positive rather than the negative. And I'll show you why here. If you were to see this ad, this is from the Humane Society, and this is an older television ad. If you were to see this, this is definitely problem solution. Trying to get it to play here, but it doesn't. Oh, I went to the next one. Okay. No, back up. Okay. Here we go. Anyway, what happens when you see this is your cortisol kicks in the brain, and your fight or flight mechanism kicks in. And what do you want to do? You want to change the channel. Oh, did I just lose you guys there? I did. Okay. If I would see this ad come on television, I would change the channel pretty quickly. Let's see if we can get to the next one. Here we go. Instead, here we have happy people with their adopted pets. And here we see the animal shelter. And here comes a van up the street, and it has a load of animals from a kill shelter down south that have been brought up to this facility. And we meet one particular dog. We have a story of, instead of one person, we have a story about one dog. And the veterinarian tells us what they're going to do. And it starts out, it's a story of aspiration. This is what we would like to see for all of these animals. It starts out on a positive note. And then we hear some of the obstacles that were faced. for this animal to reach them and be taken care of, but ultimately he's happily adopted. As I said a minute ago, the donor is always the hero. And you're probably already doing some of this online. You might say, you know, your donation of X dollars will allow Y to happen. Your donation of this many dollars will allow that to happen. Or you can fund a cow for this community in Africa or something like that. You're pointing to the donor all the time. You can do that by thanking them. You can do that by saying that this is made possible by people like yourself who generously gave their support. But you need to turn it back to the donor. You want to really try to avoid making yourself and your organization the hero, even though what you do is heroic and the people that work for you are heroic and maybe even some of your clients are heroic. But if we're raising money, we want the donor to be the real hero. I said a minute ago about telling one story about one person and the complaint that I get, but our organization does so many different things. We need to tell the story of all that we do. Well, there's a way to do that, and I call it creating a story mosaic. What you can do is tell one story about one person who was impacted in one way by your organization, and then a few weeks or a month later, you have another story about another individual who was impacted by another facet of your organization. And in time, you have this collection of stories, which all together, just like a mosaic, make a complete picture. And that can be helpful on your website, giving people the opportunity to go to the story that interests them most. It can be useful in your social media, where people who follow you will, over time, get a complete picture of what it is that you do. And here comes the trash man. I knew that they would come as soon as we got online. This particular picture I like. This is from a place called the Magic Garden in Philadelphia, which is truly magic. And Isaiah Zagar, the artist, incorporates mirrors in his mosaics, and you can see some of them sparkling there. And I think that's another great analogy for creating a story mosaic, because you want some of those stories to reflect back on your viewer. You want them to be able to see themselves in those stories. So I particularly like using that shot for this. So, okay, how do you get your project off the ground? Whether you're going to do it yourself, whether you're going to have somebody else do it, you got to get started. Where do you start? Well, you start by asking yourself some questions, and you can do that alone, or if you have a team, get your little team together and start to ask these very important questions. If you don't start out doing this, you'll just be floundering around. I mentioned at the beginning that I come from an education background, and as a teacher, I had to make lesson plans. And every lesson plan had to have a purpose and had to have some objectives. In other words, what does this program need to do? What does this lesson need to accomplish? And that's kind of where this starts. Your video is not that different from a lesson plan. We'll talk a little bit more about incorporating this into your treatment later on, but this is always the place to start. A while back, we put together an article, and we're happy to send that to you. I think, Abby, you said you were going to include that in the mailing that goes out after this. So we'll get that together for you and send that off. These are actually 10 questions that really can get your juices flowing and some things to think about before you even get started with your production. And then the question might come up, if it hadn't already, well, who's going to do this? Are we going to do it ourselves? Are we going to bring in a production company to do it? Are we going to get it done for free or cheap somewhere? And a lot of that really depends on well, it depends on a lot of things, but it depends on what kind of video you're trying to produce and where it's going to be shown, how it's going to be used, who's going to be in it, uh, and what your abilities and budgets are like. So let's look at a couple of these things. For doing it yourself is great, and if you're not doing it yourself already, you should start. Everybody's got a camera on them, practically in the form of their smartphone these days. So everybody has a place to start. Doing your own videos are perfect for quick news items. Think of that that animal shelter a minute ago, and that van pulled in with the animals from a distant kill shelter in it. Why not go out there and just grab some smartphone video and get that up online and put it on Facebook? I mean, little things like that. You ought to be doing that. A thank you message as a video. What if you got? Let's stick with that animal shelter for a bit. What if someone made a donation for some important equipment for their for the veterinary suite in there? The equipment arrives. You get some video of it. You talk to the veterinarian who's going to be using that equipment, and you send that video off to the person who donated the money for that. What better way is there to say thank you? So for quick things like that, stuff that pops up out of the blue, that's really a great place to be doing video on your own. But you got to ask yourself some questions. Do you have time for this? I had a professor who used to say that you think of how much time you think it's going to take you to do something, and then you double that, and that's how much time it should take you, and you double that, and that's how much time it will take you. So if you think something's going to take you a couple hours, it probably is going to end up taking the whole day. So you do have to be mindful of your time, because you've got very important things to be doing. Another thing is the ability. Some people are really good with taking pictures and shooting video, and other people just not that good at all. And that's important, because you don't want to put something up there that's half-baked, because it's going to make you look bad. Do I want to give money to an organization that does things in a half-baked kind of way? So you do need to be mindful of that. And then it depends on, what it is. What is the message you're getting across? Is this just a little quick and dirty thing that you're going to put up on Facebook or Instagram? Then just about anything goes. We even see it on network news these days. People are used to it. So something that is a little half-baked might be okay for a quick news item on Facebook. So you have to think of all of those things. When do you use the professional? Put a picture of Mark up there that's actually his old camera. You should see his new one. It really is monstrous. It's so heavy I can hardly pick it up. But that camera allows him to do things that you could never do with an iPhone or even a DSLR. So we'll talk a second about when you should consider using the pros and what the benefits are. So let's take a look at that. Definitely for your big event, for your big gala, you want something that looks terrific up there on the big screen. Any of these things, your awards, think of going into somebody who's being honored with a little camera and no lights and no microphone. They're not going to feel very honored. But when you come in there and you're treating them seriously, they're going to feel honored. And of course, at your awards dinner or whatever it is you're having, they're going to have something that they can be proud of up there on the screen, and they'll share with everybody they know once you get it up online. To talk about your mission is another important place on your website, because that stuff is going to be seen by a lot of people, and it's kind of your front door. It's your welcome mat. So You really want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward, because people do get a first impression that way. The benefits of using a production company is experience, and not just technical experience, but also the experience of being able to shoot in any condition, in any situation. Mark, who's my main cameraman, is in that picture there. He has worked on all kinds of programs like Trading Spaces, and he does a couple of kids programs where he travels around the world on adventures with kids, animal programs. If he can follow an animal around in the wild, he can follow anything. So if you want to do something that's bringing your viewer into the life of one of your clients, for example, he can run and gun with them very easily. You get that kind of experience when you're using professionals. And the quality reflects well on you, as we said before. By bankability, I mean that you're going to know that the project's going to be done on time and it's going to be done well. You've got to have this thing ready for your big event. You have to feel comfortable that it's going to be ready and it's going to be good. By safety, I'm really referring to insurance issues. You need to be covered. If you are hiring a professional, in case I forget to mention this later, make sure you get an insurance certificate from them. You'll want to have that. So if you are going to use professionals, should you RFP or not RFP? I hate RFPs. The reason I hate them is that they're a lot of work. But the reason you should hate them is that it's impossible to compare apples to apples with an RFP. You are not buying a widget. You are not even buying a service. You are contracting with somebody who should be your partner. You want to be able to look at them individually and analyze things, apples to oranges. So RFP is not really going to get that for you. A couple of things to avoid with an RFP if you do have to do one, because I understand many people don't have that choice. Please always let people know what your budget is. At least give them a range, because otherwise you're really going to get not just apples and oranges, but you're going to get apples and kumquats and apples and grapes. Your responses are going to be very diverse. So give them a price range. Also, those questions that you are asking yourself, make sure that you've answered them for them. Be very clear about that. And then the other thing I would say is try, if at all possible, to meet these people in person, because as I said, they're going to be a part of your team. But here's a better way, I think, for you to find a professional production company to deal with. Ask people. You have a network. If you're an AFP member, you should be able to talk to anybody else in your chapter or beyond. If you're not an AFP member, you're missing one of the biggest benefits of that organization, is the networking. I have seen people talking to each other about all kinds of things. They really are open about sharing information. So ask your network who they've used, who they're happy with. Make sure you go to their website, see what they've done, and see if you can work with them. Get together with them. See if they're the kind of person that they'd be that you would want on your team. And then very carefully listen to what they're asking. Are they asking you some of the same questions that you were asking yourself earlier about purpose, about objectives? Or are they talking too much and telling you what beautiful pictures they're going to take and what they want to do before they even know much about you? So what questions they're asking will tell you a lot. So what about students, and what about pro bono? Well, there's a chance you're going to end up like this lady here saying your prayers. Um, and again, I said these are not absolutes, because I've seen some beautiful pro bono work done by, well, particularly the cable company that is headquartered in our city, and that's Comcast. I've seen them do some beautiful pro bono work. If you can get somebody like that to do something for you, go right ahead. But be aware that whether it's a company like Comcast or students, your work may not be a priority to them. They have other things that they need to do. With students, the next three things, four things, most of the other things apply to students. You know, are they gonna represent you well when they show up for the shoot? Are they gonna look good? Are they gonna look professional? Will they will the work achieve the objectives you're after? I once talked to somebody at an AFP conference who came up to our booth and said, "Gee, we had this beautiful video produced for us." These folks were from Los Angeles. And they said the Disney company did it for us, but you know, we never use it because it really doesn't do what we need it to. And now their CEO was very much against doing any video because he thought it was a waste of time. Well, Disney does fabulous work, but maybe they didn't understand your objectives. Doing a piece for entertainment is a lot different from doing a piece for fundraising. And I was sorry to hear that, but I've heard other stories that way too. Somebody had a video made, they had somebody produce this, and they don't use it because it just doesn't work. So also be aware that it may take you a lot of your time if you have to hold somebody's hand and guide them through everything that they're doing. So you've decided who's going to work on this, and your next step is the treatment. Now, what's a treatment? I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's a pretty common term in the production world. And whether you're doing one yourself or having somebody else do one, there should be a treatment. If you're hiring out and using a production company or even a student, they should create a treatment for you. If you're doing it yourself, it's a good exercise to create one for yourself. The treatment is what I call the kind of like guiding light of the project. It's something that I refer back to every step of the way, from pre-production planning to shooting to interviewing to editing, every step of the way. When we do treatments, they include these 5 sections. And these, again, grow out of the questions that you asked yourself earlier. What is the purpose? The purpose is generally, I try to keep it to a single sentence. And it includes a verb like to motivate, or to inform, or to celebrate, or honor. This is the overarching purpose of the video that you've got. It could be to motivate people to support our organization with their generous contribution. It could be to celebrate our 25th anniversary. But then the objectives get specific. And again, this is, if any of you were teachers at any time, this is like a lesson plan. The objectives get specific. The objectives list begin with something like this. After seeing this program, the viewer will, and then you have a list of things. The viewer will understand the many facets of our mission, will feel compelled to press the donate button on our website, will want to learn more by visiting our website, things like that. Be very specific and list 3 or 4 of them. Obviously, you need to define your audience, and the strategy is, okay, well, how are we going to achieve these objectives with the audience in the place where it's going to be shown? The strategy is, how are we going to present this information? Are we going to do an explainer video? Are we going to do an interview-based short-form documentary? Are we going to do a narrative? And then list who's going to be in it, kind of work out all of those little details about how the piece is going to be put together. And the content, finally, is sort of paragraph form, how the show is going to flow. So you've got all of that. And from that, you go in one of two directions. If you are doing a narrative and you need a script, or if you're doing an explainer video and need a storyboard, you're going to write a script. And at that point, the script should come pretty easily because you've already thought about all of this stuff. Your treatment is, again, your guide. If you are, like many of the videos that we produce, doing a short form interview-based documentary, you got to think about, okay, how am I going to get people to say what I need them to say in a way that I need them to say it? And so you come up with an interview strategy. I prefer to call it that rather than questions. A lot of it will be questions, but I would invite you to think of it more strategically. Now, if you're doing the video yourself, producing your own interview video in-house, you're probably going to be the interviewer. We'll talk a little bit about techniques for that later. I prefer to do the interviews myself on projects that I'm working on because I'm listening for certain particular things, and it's just plain fun. But it's not always possible. Sometimes I can't be the one doing the interview because I don't have quite the technical knowledge or whatever. So in a case like that, you may find yourself doing the interview even though you've hired a professional production company to do it. So as I said, the interviews are fun. If you've ever been to Philly, perhaps you've been to the Reading Terminal. We are in one of the noisiest spots at the terminal here. Luckily, we have a sound guy with a mic there. My cameraman is standing to my right, and I'm there with a backpack on talking to the Chocolate Cookie King. And it's fun because you get to meet interesting people and you talk to them about interesting things, and what you're doing is having a conversation with them. So if you ever to work on a project with us, you and I might be fighting over who's going to do the interviews, now that I've told you how much fun it is. So if you're going to do it yourself, here are a couple of things that I would suggest to you that will help make it fun. First of all, do your homework. You are not interviewing this person for information. You already know what it is you want them to say. You have an idea, too, of how you need them to say it. So do your research, find out as much as you can about what this person knows about the topic at hand, and then write out your questions. But I do that primarily as an exercise. It helps me solidify it in my brain. During the interview, I don't look at them hardly at all. If I feel I'm stuck, I might glance down. But try not to look at them, because then if you're looking down at your questions and reading down a list, then you're not really having a conversation. Having a conversation will make that person feel relaxed, and that can often be a tough thing to do, particularly if you're interviewing somebody who's never been on camera before or has never done any public speaking. You've got to relax the person, so chat with them. Sometimes if you sense the person is nervous, you can even just have the person who's running the camera, or you can, if you're doing your own camera, you can start it yourself and then sit down and just chat with them. They don't even need to know that you've started interviewing them. You can just surreptitiously roll right into it and they won't even know it. So keep it conversational. Don't look down at your questions unless you get stuck. And most importantly, listen, 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 listen. You're listening, first of all, to what they're saying, so that you can respond appropriately. You're also listening to how they're saying it. You're listening to whether or not you're getting the information you need, and whether they're saying it in a way that you need them to say it, that will be useful when you edit it. one of the things I suggest, which goes against the grain of almost everybody, is telling them to repeat the question. I hate telling people to do that because it takes them away from the conversation. Then they have to be thinking, oh yes, I have to repeat the question before I give the answer, and it distracts them. Don't ask them to do that. Just let the conversation roll. Probably 9 times out of 10, they may start their answer with something that you can't use because they might just say yes, or yeah, I agree with you, or something like that. But then their next sentence can be the useful part. If they don't do that, then what I do is come back to them later on. I might scribble a little note down on my question page, and it's fine to scribble a little note now and then. They take that not as you being distracted, but you as paying attention. So scribble yourself a little note and come back to them and say, hey, you know, I really liked what you said about XYZ earlier, but to help us with our editing, could you start a sentence with the words, the reason I support this organization is, and then just finish it any way you like. That leaves them a lot more relaxed. It's going to get you better material. Just don't distract them. Have that conversation, and I promise you, you're going to have fun. There is one little thing that I do at the end that is a great little secret I will give you. And the last question I always ask the interview subject is something like this. Is there anything I've forgotten to ask you? Is there anything else you wanted to tell me that I haven't asked you about? Sometimes they'll stop and they'll think for a minute and they'll say, oh, I think we covered it all. Okay, then you're done. But a lot of times they'll stop and they'll think and they'll pull together everything that they've been talking about, and they will come out with the gem of your session. And you'll sit there with goosebumps going up and down your spine, literally. I mean, that's what happens to me sometimes when I hear the quote that is just, you know, the diamond. So use that little trick at the end. Okay, so doing it yourself. What do you need to have? The smartphone cameras are so great today. They take wonderful images. They're very crisp and clear, but you need some other things to help make them a little more flexible for you. DSLRs, a lot of folks have DSLRs, and those cameras give you a little more flexibility, but there's still some things you need. And you'll also have some cameras that are strictly video cameras. But anymore, we're seeing mostly people using their smartphones and using DSLRs for shooting. So first figure out which camera, and you may have access to several. You may want to take your iPhone on your walkathon to capture some video, and you might prefer to use your DSLR in your offices. But whatever you're doing, think about stabilizers and tripods. I'm not going to tell you what to buy because there's so much stuff out there. All you have to do is go online, look at Amazon, look at B&H in New York. They've got everything that you need. And whether it's a tripod or if you're going to be moving, there are these wonderful, inexpensive stabilizers that approximate what very expensive Steadicams used to do years ago. So it's pretty amazing what you can do. Audio equipment, we'll talk about in a minute. Lighting, lenses, your iPhone or smartphone is going to shoot a wide angle image. You may want to get something that's a little closer up. There are lenses you can get to snap right on it. Your DSLRs, of course, you've got zooms on there. By the way, do not use the zoom on your smartphone because it is not a real optical zoom. It is a digital zoom, and all it's doing is enlarging your pixels and making your picture less clear. So for the good visuals, you want to have that camera support that we just mentioned. You want to have a good space to work in. And by that, I mean a quiet space, but also a good large space. In a large space, you can put your subject close to the camera at one end of the room and let the other end of the room go out of focus. And that's going to give you a really nice look, and your video is going to look more professional. Look at the framing. How do you have it framed up? Is your person, the face, is their face, shoulders nice and large in the shot? Lighting is tricky. Indoors, most lighting comes from above, which if you take a careful look at people's faces, you will see shadows under their eyes, under their nose. It's not the most attractive thing. So you can get little lights like we saw in the previous slide here. That's a little light up next to that fuzzy microphone to throw a little light on the person's face and reduce some of those shadows. Use it sparingly. Whatever you do, don't put people in front of a window. I can't tell you how many times the client has said, oh, we have a beautiful view out of the 37th floor here. Let's shoot in front of the window. Well, yeah, we'll have a beautiful view out the window of the city beyond, but our subject will look like he's in the witness protection program because all you'll see is a silhouette. So use the light from the windows on people's faces, not as your background. Sound. Boy, this is a real bugaboo for me. When you record without a dedicated microphone, just using your camera mic, whether that's on your smartphone or on your DSLR, your sound is going to stink. Many times in some rooms, it's going to sound like it was recorded in the bathroom. It may not be clear. If you are outdoors, you're going to have wind noise and background noise. If you do not have a microphone available at that very moment, say you've got your iPhone only with you and an opportunity comes up to grab some quick video. If you have somebody speaking, get as close as you can to them so that they'll be as close as they can be to the mic on your phone. This microphone here is a little lapel mic that'll get nice and close to the person who's speaking, get you some good sound. In this shot here previously, there's a shotgun mic with a windscreen on it. This little fuzzy thing is a windscreen also. If you're outdoors, that'll knock out some of the wind noise that you hear howling sometimes across the microphone. So it's nice to have a microphone that you can get, number one, close to the individual, and number two, with a little windscreen on it. When it comes to editing, there's a bunch of things out there, but I can recommend these three from my own experience. The first one is iMovie. That's very easy to use. Unfortunately, it only comes available for Apple computers. So if you have a Mac, you already have that software. It comes as part of the package. The other two options are more professional. And once you've used iMovie, you may want to graduate to one of the others. The second one down is Final Cut Pro. That is one of the two that we use in our studio a lot. There will be a learning curve with any of these. So if you're going to do a little editing, and you should do a little editing, you should trim up the garbage at the beginning and the end. You should put some graphics on it, identify the person by name perhaps. You may want to put your logo on it. You may want to cut out the lousy stuff. You may want to put in illustrated B-roll. Final Cut, any of these will allow you to do that. Final Cut will give you a lot more leeway, a lot more effects. You can have a lot of fun with it. Premiere is part of the Adobe Creative Cloud. If you already have the Creative Cloud for Photoshop or Illustrator in your office, then you probably already have access to Adobe Premiere. It is a very powerful editing program, and if you're going to be serious about trying to do things in-house, you may want to look at that as well. If you are doing your own video, let me remind you of this very important thing. It is important that you keep everything legal for your own protection and also from an ethical standpoint. If you are an AFP member, you sign a code of ethics. As a business member of AFP, I sign it too. So we only use music that has been created for us or licensed by us, or that for some reason or other is free. If you need free music, you can find things online. Just do a Google search and you'll come up with plenty of options. You can also license music from a number of music libraries. Don't be confused when it says royalty free. Royalty free does not mean it's free. You still have to buy it. All it means when it's royalty free means that you don't have to pay a royalty every time it's aired, like on commercials. Wikimedia Commons is a great place to find free pictures. Some of the pictures you saw in this slideshow I got from Wikimedia Commons. But you can also buy graphics. Some of the other graphics you saw here are from Shutterstock. They'll cost you a little something, but they'll be legal, and you should certainly look at those options as well. So I think that's, yes, that's about all that I have, and I am open for any questions if you're looking like this woman here, if there's anything I forgot or anything that I have left you stymied about.
Well, I do have one question from Diane. At the beginning of the webinar, you mentioned a book and you had a quote from that book. Can you let us know what the title and the author of that book are?
Yes, let me simply go back to that slide and we'll get it up there again. Let's see if I can find him here. It's way up here. Oh, come on. Here he is. You talking about this one?
Yes.
Okay, yep. Yeah. Kendall Haven is his name. Fascinating guy. He did a lot of research over a number of years for the US military on how to better train new recruits through the use of story. And so he had generous government funding to do all of this research. And now that that project is over, he's out on his own. He does speak. So it's Story Proof by Kendall Haven.
Perfect.
Yeah, if you ever have a chance to hear him at a story conference or anything like that, he is a great speaker.
Very cool. And everybody, just so you know, I can add a link to this book in the email that you'll be getting from me in the next couple of days. Rich, I have another question. A number of people indicated that cost is a big concern for them when they are looking at doing a well-produced video. Is there any information that people can take back maybe to their boards or to their development directors that they can use to help make a case for a budget for a project like this?
Well, I think that slide might help.
Okay.
Yeah, especially this part of it. Well, there's a couple of thoughts about that question. First of all, you need to convince the folks who control the purse strings that it's worth doing. And I think if you can present them with a proposal that is for a reasonable amount of money that you think they might go for, and present them with some information provided by the production company you've decided to work with, so that they can have a picture of what that video is going to be like and how it will be used. Here's another big thing that I've forgotten, and James, who's been online, I thought maybe you'd remind me of this because I forgot all about it, James. To give them the idea or to plant the idea in their head that, okay, we're going to make this video for our anniversary or for our gala, but we are going to wind up with so many other ways to use this. It's not just going to be for that big event. The big event, the anniversary, the capital campaign kickoff, the honoring somebody special, people are usually more willing to spend money for those events. So if you capture them at that time and say, but we are going to be able to do so many other things with this. We are going to be able to have a dozen pieces for social media. The phrase that James and I use a lot is shoot once, deploy often. Because the expensive part of your project is going out and shooting with a good and talented crew. They command, you know, the higher dollars. And once you get them out there, use them. Example, we do some work for the Air Force Aid Society, and we travel around to Air Force bases. We tell stories of people who were helped by the Air Force Aid Society, either through emergency aid or educational grants or community programs that they have. And we'll interview, we'll do one story, like I said, one story about one person. But while we're there, I mean, we're on the base. We have the crew. We've flown out there. We sit down with all kinds of other airmen and staff members and talk about all kinds of things. When we come back, we've got all of this material for short videos that they can use for Giving Tuesday or end of year campaign. Right now, our client at the Air Force Aid Society, if you're watching, hello, Latoya, is taking some of the longer pieces that we did for education grants and chopping short quotes out of those to use for her upcoming email campaign. So it's not costing her much at all to do that because the stuff's already shot. We already know the footage. All we have to do is grab the piece, trim it up, and put it out there. So that shoot once, deploy often. I will usually include that in my proposals because I want the client to be able to share that information with his or her boss. I hope that's helpful. The other thing is you need to be upfront about what you're trying to do and what your budget is. Choose a price point that you think can fly. And then when you talk to someone about having it produced, be upfront with them about it. Here's what we need to do. Here's who we need to reach. These are our objectives. And here's what we have. What can we do? Because maybe what you have in mind is not going to be possible, but a creative person might be able to come up with another way to tackle your issue and still get a video out there that does what you need it to do and is one that you can be proud of.
Just real quick, as far as the proving the efficacy of using video, there's a ton of data out there. Google did a huge study a while back, and we have a fact sheet that we give out at AFP conferences, and we can include that. It's a PDF, but it's got a lot of the data that just shows how video makes people more likely to give, how it boosts engagement. So there, you can give all kinds of information to people if you need to convince them that you need to do a video.
Yeah, good point.
That's a really useful one too. Oh, well, neat. That was kind of the last question I had. So if any of the rest of you do have questions, or if you go through this webinar and watch it again later and you think of anything, go ahead and tweet either at Tolsma Video or at us at QGIve, and we'll make sure you get an answer. Rich, thank you so much for carving time out of your day. I don't want to keep you out of the ocean any longer. I know it's hot up there. And James, thank you also for working with us on this. This has been awesome. Everyone, thank you for attending. You've been very fun to talk to. It's been fascinating to get insight into the way you've approached video in the past and what your goals are for it. Keep an eye out for my email. It will come to you either tomorrow afternoon or Thursday morning. It'll contain a recording of this webinar, some other resources, and some information about upcoming webinars. Everybody, thank you so much. Have a great afternoon. Thanks, Rich.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.